So, welcome to Bring Your Own Questions and Beverage, right? This is the Mav Live event where we go through a monthly workshop on how to sell better, more efficiently, put your prospecting on autopilot is one of our popular sayings, but this is really all about you guys. This is this is all about how to enable you to find more customers, communicate more effectively, and we'll do it a little bit after hours, hopefully with a whiskey or a cocktail in hand. Brent, I don't know what you're drinking, but I'm drinking some Woodford.
I'm drinking some Makers. Yep. So yeah. So whiskey for sure in the cup that you got me.
Yep, the birthday gift that I got you that is
Yep.
very delayed.
Yeah, years later.
Birthday back in August, and I gave it to him a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the idea of this whole thing is like casual, like conversation. Carrie right now is I don't hear it. Carrie right now is here, and so you can chime in, but I think anybody that joins can chime in at any point. That's kind of the idea of it is a nonchalant drinking conversation.
Yeah, yeah,
and
town hall style.
Yeah, exactly. So
I had one question that popped into my mind, if I can.
Yeah.
For it.
Steve was giving us some tips on using Sales Navigator, and I was kind of wondering, like, what's the difference between MaverickApp and Sales Navigator, or how do they work together, or
Where to begin?
Yeah.
I know you guys are like, that's gonna take an hour.
Right. No. Well, it's a really good segue into talking about multi-channel outbound, like multi-channel business development, right? Because I actually think that there doesn't have to be a difference. They're just used in a different way. Maverick is really designed to email people so really first designed to find people, right? So, I mean, one thing with Sales Navigator is there's a manual component to it, right? I have to be manual in my process, and Maverick will do it automatically. But I think there's the whole idea of multi-touch or multi-channel business development is that like we can utilize different things to accomplish the same end result, right? So I think from my perspective, they're different in that one's LinkedIn and more of a social, like direct message somebody, right? And then, emailing is kind of like DMing somebody, but it's just through an email form of it, right? And sometimes depending on the person, one works better than the other. But that goes to get back to the conversation, like you can use both, right? Like why not email somebody and then reach out to them on LinkedIn Sales Navigator? But again, like Sales Navigator, I mean, everything takes time. It's time consuming, right? And so when you think about like Sales Navigator, it's a really good tool, but you have to separate time throughout your day to do it and to do it effectively.
I think Sales Navigator and check it out, and I'll wait for you to come back and tell me exactly what I'll tell you, which is it's an enablement tool. It's going to give you some data on moves a company's making, a company's hiring quickly, a company's downsizing. I just said company. Save that, Risa. Yep. A company's downsizing quickly, and you can use some of that enablement data to reach out with a purpose in mind and to stimulate some interest. But to Brent's point, MaverickApp is more of a prospecting tool. And so if you come at this through the lens of business development and sales, it's a ton of work, which is why no one wants to do it anymore. And part of the problem is that the ton of work involves multiple touches, which goes back to Brent's point about how many times you have to go to Sales Navigator, find a contact, make a message, make a follow-up message. Hey, you forgot to get back to me. You said you get back to me, you didn't get back to me. It's like, oh my God, like 20 touches all in one place or you can just use a tool to.
Yeah. And it's okay, like, right. And there's probably tools with LinkedIn, or I know there are tools with LinkedIn that you can schedule follow-ups and stuff like that. Right. And that's okay. But the idea of being able to use multiple different tools to accomplish one result, right? Like I'm somebody where like I don't spend a ton of time on social, right? And if you hit up my inbox on social, I get hit up with so many different things that I know are selling me. So like that might not work as well as like a nice crafted email, right? Like if somebody hits me enough on email, I'm going to notice it a lot more than if somebody hits me up on LinkedIn. So I think the idea is just getting everybody, to understand that like you can use multiple different ways. It doesn't have to be one way. But I mean, Carrie, you can probably agree with everybody that selling the new business development for you is probably one of the hardest parts of your job.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
And it sounds like, I mean, yes, you can schedule things on LinkedIn, but it still has that manual piece, and it's not really tracking, this is your second time reaching out to them, this is your third time. So
Yeah.
you don't know, is this someone I've reached out to twice or 17 times,
Yeah.
unless you're manually tracking it. And you probably don't want to get to 17. I mean, maybe you do, I don't know.
Well,
I think in some senses you do. Go ahead,
yeah.
Brent.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I think it's okay that you get to 17, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is you're never going to get to 17 because
Right.
like your brain is just not gonna, it's not gonna stay in that lane long enough. Like human nature is like, if like eventually I'm just gonna be like, all right, this isn't worth it anymore, and like you're just not gonna do it, right? And so like that's where the rub is, right? And like so. But again, bringing it back to the conversation, like that's what makes multi-channel outreach so important, because try different things, like do different things. We get customers all the time that are like, oh, this isn't working. It's like, well, are you doing something else with it? And like it would, like, additionally with the contacts, and they're like, no. And it's like, why? Like, this isn't just a magical tool that like does everything for it. Like, it's great and it does a really awesome job at like a huge component of your business development. But if you're not then willing to take the information that we're providing you and do something, some other channel with it, well, of course it's not going to be, 100% successful, right? So
Yeah. There's a huge opportunity missed with not taking the data available to you and not putting it to work for you. And I think a really fantastic example goes back a few years. And one of my biggest collaborative partners I've ever worked with, I cold called the guy and he said, hey, what you're offering is exactly what I need. Try me next week at this time. I did. And I didn't end up closing any business with him for a year. I ended up calling him every week at the same time, unless otherwise directed. He'd always answer the phone. Steve, hey, how's it going? Yep, call me this week next time. To your point, Carrie, 17 touches. It wasn't 17. It was at least 50 because I didn't close any business for a year. And that's what it takes sometimes. But it wasn't until I started kind of getting out of my own way and trying a different kind of outreach. I shot him a text. Hey, Tony, what's going on? And I don't think that can be how overstated. I don't think it can be overstated how important it is to just try something different. And I know Brent, I know what Brent's going to say, because he and I think a lot the same way in this sense, but like marketing and sales should be best friends. And if I were to say to you, hey, Brent, marketing has created a handful of emails that have been opened 30 times by one contact. Maybe it's not a lead yet. Did marketing do their job?
right. Yeah. No, no, they didn't. I don't. Who knows, right?
I think they did.
Yeah.
See, I absolutely, unequivocally think they did.
Yeah. If people are opening and you have eyeballs on the brand, yeah.
Yeah, they absolutely did a fantastic job. But now you take that contact who's opened a handful of emails, a bunch, who knows, and put it in the hands of your sales team, and now they have some kind of ammunition to initiate something else. Go to LinkedIn. Make a comment, make a note, connect. Hey, Brent, I've seen that you've opened a bunch of emails. Like, what am I missing that you're seeing? And why haven't we had a conversation yet?
Yeah. I mean, it's, and then that goes to just talk about how hard it is, right? I mean, business development is just such a hard animal. Like, it's such a hard thing. And I think, and I'm not even sure that most people understand how hard it is, right? And I'm including a lot of the people that do it for a living, right? Like, where it's like, it just, to do it correctly is just massive amounts of touches, and getting creative with the way that you can connect with people and reach out to them. And like, and you and I have talked about this a lot, Steve, in terms of text messaging. I mean, I used to never text, and granted, I mean, way back in the day when we didn't have really cell phones or text messaging, and when I first started in sales, like that wasn't an option. But like, even as I came up, like I never really even considered it. And then my wife would just like murder it with customers, like where she's at dinner, like laughing about like, a conversation she's having with, this CTO of this huge company. And I'm just like, what? And she's like, and like, and it started to be like, oh, okay, like there's there's another component, there's another channel, right? And so I started utilizing it. And so now, whenever I get the chance, like I utilize that channel of text messaging with people and to get them re-engaged, because everybody has their own little thing. But it's a crazy amount of time. Like, again, like Carrie, we've talked about it even before. I know, I've had conversations, but like it's so time consuming that you eventually just stop doing it. Like, you're just like, right. Like, I mean, this is why people hire BDRs, right? It's like, cause like, we don't have the time to do this multi-channel. Like, I need you to go do it. But
Yeah,
even them, I don't think they do it like the way that you should.
that's an important point that you guys bring up that maybe I don't think you're highlighting enough, is that is it viewed or not? There's not really an easy way of telling, at least not that I'm aware of, if a LinkedIn message has been viewed. Most of the time you can just tell if it's delivered or not. So
Yeah.
having that extra data, I would think, would be really valuable from that the Maverick app gives you,
Yeah, I mean, and so we talk about that, right? Like your opens, right? And granted, just the way that you track opens are always a little bit of a crapshoot, right? Like you have all of them, but I would venture to say like 15 to 20% of your open count is pretty inaccurate. 80% is probably accurate, right? And so, but and then people are like, oh well, opens. Like, yeah, but like what's the information you're trying to get from that, right? And the information that I perceive that you should try to get from that is like, if I'm getting opens, even if 80% of them, even if I only calculate 80% of them, it means that I'm hitting the inbox, and it means that people are getting eyeballs on it, right? And this is purely from an email perspective, right? Not from LinkedIn or something, but like from an email perspective. Well, that's a lot of data for me to now go do something else, multi-channel, right? They're opening it. I know they're seeing it. Maybe they're part of the 20%, but I'm going to take the shot that they're part of the 80%. And I'm going to go reach out to them on a different channel, right? And know that they've already seen my brand, know that they already have acknowledgement of who I am. So now my next outreach on a different channel is totally different. Obviously, you can't do that with text when you've never talked to the person, or I would hope we're not, reaching out to people over text if we haven't had any type of relationship with them. But so that's kind of the crazy thing with it. And it's weird that we even like are talking about this as in depth now, because we talk about it so much with our customers about like utilize what the information that we're providing you, but at the same time, go do something with that information. Don't just sit back and like hope that it's going to do wonderful, like wonders, magical things for you.
So I have a question for you, Brent.
Don't do it.
Don't. Okay. Yeah, that's it. We're done. No. So there's been a number of examples in our work with somebody who, let's just say that they don't have a sales team. They're a sole proprietor, small business. They're not in the headspace that they are a salesperson, even though they 100% are, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's just the nature of the role. Carrie, right? So although Carrie has a larger business than many of the people that I'm talking about in this instance. Sure. But anyway, what do you say to people? Yeah, I agree, Risa. We are all salespeople. What do you say to people who need to adopt the mentality that they can't just sit in their hands and let a tool do all the work for them, but kind of get into this analysis paralysis headspace? What do I say? When do I say it? What happens if they don't reply? What if they actually didn't open the email or remember me? What do you say to those people?
Yeah, so like that's where I kind of so this is weird, right? Because like it's crazy weird timing for Risa's comment, because this is where I get into the idea of like we're not all salespeople, right? Like we might all want to be salespeople, and by nature we're always selling something. But like, are we able to put ourselves in the mindset of like, hey, do the work? Like whatever. Like I understand that you're not going to want to. You're never going to want to, but just do the work. Like that's step number one, right? Like sorry, but like, and then number two is like if you're overthinking it, if you're thinking about it to that level, then you're honestly overthinking it. Like you're like, who cares what somebody says if they say no? And I understand that's hard for a lot of people, right? To like get into that, but realistically, like who cares, right? So if you so if you're getting down to it at that macro level, my recommendation is like, get out of that, like let it flow. Like that kind of goes back to my whole thing of like, if you're selling, then you've lost the deal, right? Like just have a conversation with people, just communicate with them, like just literally communicate and have a conversation, and whatever they're saying, you're going to learn a ton, and then whatever you're saying back to them, they're going to learn a ton to you, right? And so I think people that like overthink it, sometimes it's just like, you almost want to just be like, stop overthinking it, like just don't, just go do it, right? And because what you'll find is like, get out of your comfort zone for a minute, and then all of a sudden, whoa, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought, right? Like that no is not as bad as I ever thought that it would have been, right? And then at the end of the day, it ends up becoming something that you're able to do. But I do think it takes a special kind of person in the right mindset to just be comfortable allowing those things to flow. And what holds us back, right? So we as humans don't do things that we're just inherently uncomfortable with, right? For the most part, like as humans, like if something's tough or something is hard to do, we're going to put that off as long as we possibly can, because like that's the last thing that I want to do, because it's uncomfortable for me. And so that's where it comes to business development, because there are these multiple follow-ups that you have to do with people, multi-channel in different ways, and you have to chase them until they tell you to go away. That's a really uncomfortable thing for people to do. So they just stop doing it, and that makes it, and it just makes it that much more difficult, of a thing to do, and that's why it's so hard to do. Yeah, so I don't know if that really answers, but like it's kind of two-tiered. Like one, like just do the work. Like at some point you just have to do the work. If you're a small business owner and you're trying to grow and you're trying to do it, you got to do the work. There's no way around it, right? And I'm not talking everything else. I'm speaking specifically to business development, right? Like you have to be diligent in doing the work as it relates to that stuff. And then you have to kind of just get yourself into a mode of your primary focus is building your business and nothing else, right? And so if that takes 1 million people to tell you no and to F off, well, then like whatever. Like I've had a lot of people tell me to F off, like,
But the 1,000,001th person might be the big deal, might be the yes. You know what I mean? So there's to kind of get yourself out of that headspace of analysis paralysis. What do I say? When do I say it? What if they say this and it stops me from taking any kind of action, right? I heard this exercise done once, and I'll keep it brief, but the idea was, if you knew that after 100 no's, there was a guaranteed yes, how fast would you try to get and push through the no's? And and how many channels, how many ways would you try to get those no's?
Yeah.
Right. And everybody with a brain between their ears says as fast as possible, right? Like I would try to get through 500 no's in a day because there's 5 yeses there.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right. Right. And look, which is kind of where the law of averages come from, right? Like if you understand your law of averages, then you can understand a whole lot, right? Like if you know pretty definitively on average, if I hit up 200 people, 5 people are going to say yes. And of those, 1 person's going to say yes beyond that, right? Like your goal is then 200 people or 200 connections, right? But that goes back to touches, right, Steve? So like 10 to 14 touches to get a response from somebody, not to get a yes. To get a response from somebody is 10 to 14 touches. So it's like, but you have to know that that's your number, right? But I love that analogy, man. Like I know that you and I have probably gone back and forth on it, but it's such a good way to think about it, right? Like if somebody told you definitively, which funny enough, definitively, there's always a yes at the end of it. Right?
Always a yes somewhere. And you can study your past results, and from your past results, you can figure out what your 100 is. Maybe it's not 100, maybe it's 80, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 120, who knows?
Yeah.
You can figure out definitively how many no's it takes for you to get a yes.
Yeah.
And now that you know how many no's you need, just start plowing through them.
Right. Yeah. And I think that is what makes multi-channel outreach so important, because we know definitively
I'm glad I'm not the only one who can't talk.
Yeah. Definitively that the vast majority are not responding after 1 or 2 emails or after 1 or 2 connections, right? So how do we get them to respond? And the only like clear way is like, well, let's use multiple different ways that we can do that, right? Text message, LinkedIn, email, phone call, like whatever it takes realistically to get people to respond to that. Because it's, to your analogy, like you're using a specific number, but that is real. That's a real thing. Like at the end of it, there's always a yes. Like just how many no's or how many like just nothings are you willing to get to before you get to that yes? Yeah.
So to take a step backwards for a second, David joined us a moment ago. So David, this is kind of a town hall style, bring your own questions and beverage is what we're calling it. And we're talking about multi-channel outreach and multi-channel business development today through the lens of cold outreach, following up, keeping people top of mind. So the intention here is to, if you have any questions, like bring them up. That's what this is all about. So there you go. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
David is dropping in the chat. Go ahead.
Question for you sales guys. There's kind of a fine line between wanting to get that yes and being a dick. I mean, I got 3 messages from someone and I didn't read any of them. I didn't open any of them. And by the third one, I literally had to be like lunatic lady and be like, no, I'm not and it's just, so do you have any tips for how to approach people without being a dick?
Yeah, I do. One, be authentic, right? Brent will tell you that he loves sales. He is straight up a salesperson, but like he'll also be the first person to tell you he understands human nature and that we shouldn't be pricks to one another, right? Like just be authentic in your communication with people. There's nothing wrong with asking real talk questions to figure out what tangible next steps are. Brent and I talk about this stuff all the time. Something that you might consider a hardball sales question is actually just a normal business question that anybody who might be doing business with somebody else should ask in order to get to next steps. So that's one, right? And maybe it applies to you, maybe it doesn't. But another thing, and this is kind of a non-answer answer, but it's get yourself out of the headspace that you're being a dick to somebody, and stop putting your head trash into their head, right? Like you're doing a job. Do you believe that your job improves the world of the people around you? Yes, I do. What's it going to take to improve the world around you? Well, sorry to say, well, I'm not sorry to say because I love sales, right? But sorry to say, that's going to involve work, which goes back to Brent's point about how much work and effort it's going to take, right? But if you just put your why first and you be authentic as you execute the why multiple times over and over and over again, you're going to get people who are just absolutely miserable and tell you to pound sand and put swears in their reply to you. I say go with God. You know what I mean? Like if someone's that upset over a brief email or a brief outreach that they believe will help you, but also put food on their table, I'm on board for that. You know what I mean? I'm on board for helping people improve their world and helping them improve mine. So yeah. I'll leave it at that.
No, I think nail on the head with get out of that headspace. We're all human, right? Like you're never gonna get around somebody being frustrated. Like it's just gonna happen, right? I always look at it as like, well, maybe that person had a bad day, right? So Carrie, like you, like on that day, was something else going on that like just triggered you when you finally got that email that you're like, and maybe not, right? Maybe not, but maybe there was. I have no idea, right? People have bad days all the time and they just finally just so sick and of whatever, and they just, get angry at somebody and they lash out and they do it, right? And so from that,
like 3 emails in 48 hours from 2 different people, and I was like, for fucking sake, I haven't even had a chance to read your first email yet. Like,
was that at the same company?
Yeah.
Okay, so
wow.
So rule number 1, don't be a dick. Don't do that.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got you.
So I mean, definitely don't do that. Like that's just that goes back to the human thing though, right? Like you should communicate, and I was going to say this, but you should communicate with people the way that you would want to be communicated with, right? And so that means, and I talk about this with our customers, I talked about it when Steve first came on, like when we talk about our cadences in between emails, my whole thing is like, let's give them like a week to get back to us, because we have to assume like maybe they're on vacation, maybe they're super busy, maybe, right? Because I know that I would kind of want that, right? I would want that respect to understand that maybe I'm just busy and haven't had an opportunity to get back to you, right? That's not to say that you can't be right. But so yeah, definitely don't do that. I think that that's rude. I think that's disrespectful. I mean, I think I always go by the idea of, I'm going to reach out to somebody the way that I would want to be reached out to, like that, what would work for me is going to work for somebody else.
You guys
That
should do a
said,
segment on what not to do.
but not to, yeah, right. We
Actually,
actually,
yeah,
do
Risa,
that.
that'd
We
be
will
awesome.
do that.
Yeah.
Risa, write that down.
Yeah.
But then the other part though is yeah, like you're never going to get around the frustrated people, the people that just hate getting those emails,
Right.
or outreach. Like you're never going to, but the reality is like, you still got to reach out to them. You still have to, like, you have no way. I mean, I've had people respond to me really mean, and I've actually responded back being like, listen, like, I don't know what world you're living in, but I have no way of knowing where you're at. Like that's, I'm not in your brain. Like I don't read minds. Like I have no clue. I apologize that this struck you in such a way,
Do you know
but
what set me off is they didn't have an unsubscribe button. I was like, you have spammed me 3 days in a row for less than 48 hours and I can't even just unsubscribe. Like I literally
yeah,
have to respond to you to get away from you.
yeah, which is a
So,
great
which
tactic,
is
by the way. But no, I'm just kidding.
You want to know why, Carrie? You want to know why it's a great tactic? Because people like you are going to now work with us because we're going to approach people in a human way, as opposed to
Yeah.
some automated 3 times in 24 hours
Yeah, but
crap.
I don't agree with the
I
I don't
joke.
agree with the fast touches like that. I think that's a little bit too much. But I will say like that no matter what you do, you're never going to realistically get around that. And that's where you have to be okay with like the no's, because people are going to be nasty and they're going to respond and they're going to say terrible things sometimes, right? And you just got to kind of go with your own brain of like, okay, like I either hit them on a bad day or they're just a crappy person. And like seriously, and that's okay. Or I did something incorrect in my flow, right? So that person for you, Gary, you're obviously not a crappy person, you're a great person, right? And like, and they didn't necessarily hit you on a bad day, but they kind of hit you on a bad day because they hit you so many times, right? And so for them, they just need to rework whatever their structure is to ensure that people aren't. But that said, I would implore you in those situations to just respond to that person trying to do their job and just say, hey man, like, tell you why I'm not going to work with you. You hit me up in 3 days. Like I suggest you change your tactics. We would never know as a sales rep, like we're never going to know that unless somebody tells us, but there's definitely a way to say that in a really nice way of like,
Oh yeah,
I'm
I
not
was
going to respond to you.
nice.
What's that?
I was nice about it, just in
Was
my
it like a picture of
nice.
like you with a knife? You're like, yeah, get out of
Just
here.
like I'm not telling you what I really want to say, but yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, but again, that makes it tough. And so I think the biggest answer to, or the best answer I can say, like to not being a dick is just reach out to people the way that you would want to be reached out to. If somebody was prospecting you, what would, even if you were a no, like what would make you feel comfortable to get that email and be like, nah, not for me, I'm good, and do it that way. But again, like I like to bring this back to the topic of multi-channel. That I think is what makes multi-channel so important too, because sometimes it's just people don't want to get an email. I'll take a text all day long, right? Or I'll take a not me, but I mean I will, but like whoever, right? Or I'll take a LinkedIn message all day long, but I'm not gonna, but if you're gonna email me, I get so many emails every single day. Now I hate everybody that emails me. So like your brain's going to be like, okay, I don't want an email anymore. Right. And so I think that goes back to multi-channel in a really nice way of like using different assets, using different ways to reach out to people and connect with them. You're going to learn a lot about the buyer too.
Yeah, I think this is a great case study in different personalities and preferences, right? So like Brent just said that he'll take a text all day. Whereas, and I'm learning to come around on this, I won't. That's like sacred territory for me. When these people that are using automatic text services like the public elections time of year, they slide into my text messages all day, 4, 5, 6 times a week. And I'm like, that is sacred stuff right there. That's my phone number. You know what I mean? Now I got to get over it. Frankly, I just got to get over it because it's not going anywhere. But that said, if you were to reach out to me on email or on LinkedIn, or heck, just called me, I'm probably answering the phone. And moreover, if I found out that you were cold calling me, right? Cold outreach, I've opened a couple of your emails, but never replied. We'll put it in the MaverickApp context here, right? And I've never replied, and you were to pick up the phone and call me, I'm actually going to give you the time of day because I'm in sales. You know what I mean? Like I'm literally, if you butcher your first 30 seconds with me, I'm gonna be like, hey man, why don't you just start over? I promise I'm not going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like I'll listen to you because I know that you believe in what you're selling. I know that you're trying to put food on your table. I know you're, generally speaking, your intentions are good. But this just proves the point that we all have a different way we prefer to be reached out to and are more receptive within.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I don't. Yeah, I'm actually like I'm amazed at myself that I haven't really thought about it this way until like we started like really talking about it here. But because even here, like we get them through Maverick and then we put them into marketing, and then our marketing team of course has set up like a great process to get them in marketing. But like if you think about that, like there's a lot of people that just want to do their own research. Like I'd much rather do, and that's a lot of people, right? There's a huge percentage of people out there that just want to do their own research. And that's okay. But there's also a huge amount of people that want to do their own research, but if you reach out to them, they're willing to have the conversation, right? But those people that only want to do their own research, is like you're never going to get down that path and like get them to that if you're not willing to explore different channels of outreach, right? So like it might be first I'm going to outreach to somebody, then I'm going to drop them into marketing, which is what we do, right? And so they might, after they get some marketing material, might be like, hey, I can now do my own research. I have enough information here, so I'm going to go do that. And so I think that there's just this lock on like this one thing. So like, well, because I want to say, I don't think people I don't think people get locked into just one thing. I think they try a lot of different ways, but they don't do it together. They don't do it congruently, right? Like they don't, it's either one or the other. It's either marketing is siloed and like doing all this stuff, or they're not, right? And then sales is like separate from it, and they're doing all this stuff. And it's like, what? Like, let's make it congruent. Like, let's work together and like, and actually use it as a multi-channel, because all the people that me as a salesperson is reaching out to, maybe there's a huge percentage that just much rather do their own research and let marketing do that, right? Which is why we have that send to marketing button on our platform, right? But vice versa is like, there might be a lot of people that are going through the marketing funnel that like aren't willing to do their own research to that extent. So they would much rather have a conversation where they can ask questions and interact with somebody. And I'm that way. Like, I mean, I do my own research to an extent, but I would much rather then get on the phone with somebody and be able to interact and ask questions in real time for them to be able to answer for me, because I just don't have the time otherwise, right? And I think without exploring all the different ways that you can reach out to somebody and all the different ways that you can connect with them, there's a huge boat that gets missed on that.
Yeah. Well said. Can I applaud? Is there an applaud button?
I think there is. Yeah, let me send it to you. No,
clap. There it is. There's the clap button.
Yeah. Oh, cool. There actually is.
There actually is a clap button.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
You guys have any questions?
I know David said he had a coworker on the phone, so
yeah.
Hopefully it's like a good demo or cold call.
He's been listening this whole time without saying a word.
I love it.
Yeah.
So Steve, so I think you're really good at, so I want you to talk a little bit about like your process, because you're really good at multi-channel. So Maverick, of course, does a lot of the upfront work for you from a cold perspective.
Yep.
But when it comes to networking and LinkedIn and cold calling, you have a really good knack and ability to kind of bring those things together and utilize those. And so you should talk a little bit about your flow. I'd love to understand like your flow, what you use the most, what you use the least, what works best for you, and how you use those to your advantage.
Yeah, and you know what? So transparently, I should do a better job of having metrics as far as how many like networking, like virtual coffees, right, Carrie, that I should have per week. But I always seem to wedge those in, so I've never been concerned about hitting a metric. But I should do a better job of monitoring this stuff. But that said, so what I look at is the pipeline, right, Brent, and where opportunities are and how close they are to closing. And then based on the pipeline, I jump into a relevant revenue generating activity that will produce a sooner or later result, right? So I'm almost always networking, right? So that's a given, but it's usually a long play. Relationships come over time. So that should be constantly running in the background. So to everybody as a best practice is get yourself out there networking, right? Like I'm not saying be a networking machine. I'm not saying you have to, we talked about this earlier, Brent, being, introduce 20 people a week. I'm just saying, get out there networking, right? Go meet some people. So that's always in the background. But what I love about cold calling is it goes right to the decision maker often. They immediately know they're being pitched. And I use that phrase loosely, right? Because when you're doing it right, you're not actually pitching anything. You're just trying to have a conversation.
Well, I think you tell people in your cold calls that you're pitching them, right?
I tell them it makes it a cold outreach. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
for sure. Sure. It cuts right through it all, right? And so people that are looking for a relationship up front, go networking. Like that's what networking creates for you. But cold calling solves quickly a pain point or provides a benefit very quickly, and the relationship and the trust comes shortly after, right? You have to back it up by doing what you're supposed to do. So my workflow, Brent, is really kind of simple, like networking in the background, constantly running, increasing or decreasing at levels that fit the pipeline and the meetings I have to have. Cold calling fits in when I need to create opportunities very quickly, and I should do a lot more of it because it just cuts through all the junk, right? Yeah. And then the relationship comes later. And I do want to take a moment to touch on this. I will answer that question, David, absolutely. I do want to take a moment to touch on this. If you're a relationship person, sales is about relationships. Yep. No significant amount of money has ever changed hands without a relationship, right? Totally. Yeah. So when we say sales, a lot of times it's associated with pitching or pitch slapping, constantly putting your pitch foot forward, right? But at the end of the day, if you have a transaction, there was some trust there. There was a relationship there. There was a problem you solved. There was a business improved. There was a lot of impacts and effects that happened, right? So I'm not suggesting that cold calling doesn't involve a relationship. If you're a relationship person and you're not afraid of cold calling, you should be, because, and I know that there are limitations, Carrie, right? Like you literally can't do some of these things for compliance and legal reasons. But that said, if what's holding you back is you don't think cold calling is relationship driven, you're dead wrong. Those come. So network, cold calling to cut through the crap and cut through the fluff and create a relationship faster, right? And then on the back end is LinkedIn outreach, which is kind of a fusion of the two, because people can very, very quickly qualify whether or not they want to talk to you simply by looking at your profile. But then you can overcome whether or not they want to take a meeting with you based on the messaging you say. So like if you were to look at my profile or Brent's profile or David's profile, you can quickly see what they do professionally. And you might assume that if they reached out to you, right, that they're trying to sell their product. And you might be right, but you also might be wrong. And what's going to tell you the difference is what their messaging is, right? So I'm really good at a message that drives, hey, I want to have a conversation with you at some point, maybe not now, but in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's how we met.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that everybody that is with MaverickApp is because I sent them your way. So you're welcome.
100%. Yeah. Totally remember that. Yeah.
Yep. So that's my workflow. It's really just consistency, which is what we're all about, right?
And then of course, email.
Yep. And of course, email. Of course, email. I thought that was a given at this point. So David put in the chat, what is your opening pitch when you tell them you are cold calling them? So I want to answer this with a brief story. I started doing this years ago. When I first started in insurance, I would cold call leads. I would cold call businesses. I had no idea what I was doing. But what I started loving was telling people right up front, David, this is a cold call. Are you ready? And I'm not saying it was perfect, but it actually got pretty good results. And I was told not to do it. They're like, they won't listen to you. You got to hit them with 3 quick value propositions. You got to keep them on the horn for 10 more seconds so that you can deliver those 3 quick, blah, 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 blah. And I actually gave up on it because the person telling me what to do was a very successful agent with a team, and he cold called and never saw him cold call, right? So now we're seeing some differences and some dissonance there. So I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
Flash forward 10 years, right? And I listened to Donnie call one time. And I'm like, that's what I used to
my idea.
So, I took a page out of Donnie's book because it's just a fantastic way to humanize a conversation. And so it just goes like this, David. David, hey, it's Steve from MaverickApp. Actually, David's on mute, so I'll use this with Brent. Brent, hey, it's Steve from MaverickApp.
Hey, Steve. How's it going?
I'm well, man. I'm vertical.
Good.
The name, does that ring a bell? MaverickApp.
No, I think I've heard you, but no.
All right, I'm gonna assume that you haven't heard of us. That makes this a cold call. Should I hang up on myself, or would you like me to tell you why I'm calling you?
Sure. Tell me why you're calling.
Awesome. I'll be brief, and then I go into the pitch. And the pitch is simply this: MaverickApp is an automated prospecting tool. It puts your prospecting on 400x every single month. Most of our customers are struggling with business development and don't know how to solve the leaks. What are you currently doing to solve those problems? And instead of telling them, are you interested? I'm asking them what they currently do to solve that. And now they're coming out of the walls with, well, we have HubSpot, we have a CRM. It's like a CRM isn't what we do, right? We have MailerLite. Well, a MailerLite isn't what we do, right? Well, we have a marketing team. Well, a marketing team isn't what we do.
Yeah, and so I'm sorry, the sun was back.
Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox here.
But I like, so it's interesting because I've actually seen this happen before from you, and I was like a little bit like thrown back like the first time you did it, and then I was like, oh crap, he's like actually like people like are talking to him. Which by the way, I'm a terrible cold caller. I am a very good emailer. I'm very good networking. I am very good at other stuff. Awful cold caller. So Carrie, we'll jump into your question here or your thoughts here in a second, but I've heard this work, and it's such an interesting thing because it kind of cuts through all the BS right away, right? Like you want to, like that person knows where they're at, you know where they're at, and quite honestly, like even if you get off the phone with them, bring this back to multi-channel, even if you get off the phone with them and they had told you like no, don't continue, as afraid as people would be, like that's a really good opportunity to now send them an email and say, hey, I just called you. I know you weren't interested in a cold call pitch, but I understand email can be really good for people, whereas a cold call wouldn't be, right? Like, here's what I wanted to talk about. Let me know if you're interested in a call. Boom. Like maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but like, again, multi-channel, right? There's another avenue for me to reach out to them, and it's warm, and it's just, I've already called you. You already know who I am. Like, here's what I was going to talk to you about. Like, I understand cold calling isn't like, maybe you don't have the time, but maybe you'll have time for email. I don't know. Right. And so, so I think that's really interesting. So like that kind of actually loops into what you said, Carrie. So Carrie said, I can't cold call, but I need to be better about warm calling where I am already connected, but don't have them as a client yet. So that's multi-channel all the way. That's where LinkedIn, the text message, the email, where everything can come into play. right? And so you might need to be better at cold calling or the warm ones, but then it's not really, well, it's not cold calling, but like, but you don't put that in here, but like calling the warm ones, but maybe that's the last ditch effort, right? Like, because you're uncomfortable with it. I talked about this earlier, like people hate to do things they're uncomfortable with. Fair, but like maybe you're comfortable with emailing and then LinkedIn and then a text message. And then if you don't hear from them, give them a call. Hey, I've sent you about 5,000 messages some other way and you haven't responded to me. So I thought I'd give you a call, right? But point is like, you know, so I think maybe you need to get better at it, but maybe it's just a matter of placing it somewhere within your cycle that makes you more comfortable, right? Because at the end of your cycle, that's going to be a lot more comfortable for you than the beginning of your cycle, right? If the beginning of your cycle is I'm going to email them, then I'm going to shoot them a LinkedIn message, then I'm going to shoot them a text or any variation of that. And then my last step is I'm going to call them. That's my last resort. Well, 90% are going to get back to you before that. So now you don't have to get out of your comfort zone as much. But like then the other 10%, okay, by the time you make that warm call, I've already sent them multiple messages and I can easily speak to that, right? Like, hey, Steve, I shot you a couple messages. I know I reached out on LinkedIn, you know, sorry to give you a call, but I hadn't heard back from you, you know, was hoping, you know, you could give me some kind of answer, right? That's so much better, right? And might be a lot easier for you. I'm not saying do it in that order, but that might be a lot easier for you to do doing it that way.
Yeah, love that. Applause from Karen. So we're at the top of the hour. Does anybody have any questions or something that you want us to troubleshoot from a sales or multi-channel outreach perspective?
Or recommendations for next time.
Recommendations. Yeah. Ooh, good one. Recommendations for next time.
Yeah.
I really like the what not to do. I feel like you could make that a whole.
That's a long one. Yeah.
Yeah, I could talk about that for a couple of years, I think.
Just tips on like make sure you're not emailing 3 times in 2 days. Like give people 48 hours to maybe read the email.
Yeah.
Can we tag you in our follow-up post about that? Thank you, David. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Can we tag you in that follow-up post about this story that gave us the idea of what not to do?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Done. We're doing it.
Yep.
I don't know, Risa, do we have one set up for next time, or are we open to new ones now?
Oh, the schedule.
Is Risa feeding her kids? Like, or is she listening?
She's looking. She's looking.
Okay.
Carrie, Risa's our marketing director.
So yeah, she met her at
I was gonna say I met her.
Oh, that's right.
Badass, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
I can probably
I have to jet too, guys.
Cool.
But this
That was
great.
awesome.